had this yearning to work with people and not work in a lab. And
Yep.
so I was trying to find the right fit. I had explored going to medical school and doing an MD, PhD, but in the career planning center there at the University of Iowa, I happened upon in this folder naturopathic medicine, having never heard of it before. And I was just, blown away. Like, this is such a good fit for me. And I just went and I applied to Bastyr University in Seattle. That was my first choice, and, got accepted there, went into that program. I continued to do research on the side. They actually have a really nice research program there. But then as a naturopath, the core principles are understanding and treating the cause, nutrition as a foundation, gut health, that whole concept of all disease starts in the gut. Really got a great foundation there at Bastyr. And then once I got out into clinical practice, that's where you really learn, right? Where you start working with a lot of people over many years and getting to follow them for, years to, understand how the therapeutics are working. And always working with that nutrition aspect and gut health. And so with the bitters, these really are just bioactive compounds found in plants. And, I also really worked a lot with genomics, and I still do nutrigenomics, and really being able to understand these chemicals that kind of put a lot of foods in the superfood category are essentially these compounds that bind bitter taste receptors. And those receptors are all over the body. And it's so important that we have a lot of different exposures to different types of bitter compounds in the plant world.
Yeah. So can you give an example of a common bitter food that people might, come in contact with that they're maybe already eating that they don't even realize?
Yeah. So I would say most people are eating bitters and they don't even realize they are. Because we think about, if you look up bitters, you're going to find things like alcoholic bitters. So some of us are familiar with those, and those are good. And they actually are good for digestive health. That whole concept of people having an aperitif or a digestive around a meal. But then there is just like the bitter compounds that are found in food. And so you'll find these in the common things like onions and garlic, leafy greens, all this stuff that, we know is really healthy for us. A lot of what's in there are compounds that bind bitter taste receptors. It doesn't always have to taste bitter, and it can still have bitter compounds in there, but food like lemon has a bitter taste. It certainly it binds our sour receptors as well. But arugula is a favorite bitter of mine. So like I often will recommend, and I eat regularly, arugula salads with a little lemon, a little bit of olive oil. And that gets your digestive system ready for like a more substantial meal. So starting out with herbal teas, warm lemon water, an arugula salad, or even like baby leafy greens are really concentrated in these bioactives. That gets your body ready for improved digestion.
Okay, so when we talk about that concept of digestion, or all health starts in the gut, or disease starts in the gut, either way, however your gut is set up. So how do bitters specifically help with digestion? I know you just said that it kind of gets the ball rolling, so to speak, to be able to have a more substantial meal, but can you describe for us a little bit how that helps? How do bitters help with digestion?
So some of the things we think about when, you're working with a practitioner and trying to get a better concept and understanding of how good your digestion is. So some of the basics we think about, first of all, is there enough stomach acid? Or is there too much stomach acid? But in a lot of cases, an unidentified problem can be low stomach acid, and bitters can help stimulate a little bit more acid production in the stomach. Now, if you do have, like if you're an over-secretor, dietary bitters are not going to be a problem for you. If you're using really concentrated, like herbal bitter supplements, then, that wouldn't be a right fit. It wouldn't necessarily do any damage. Unlike if you were an over-secretor and actually took hydrochloric acid, that could cause a problem, certainly. But digestive bitters can be a safer way to adjust this acid in the stomach. So we need that in place for sure, right? So we need to to get that phase of digestion working better. But then once food moves out of the stomach and gets into the intestines, we know we're thinking about digestive enzymes there. Bitters can affect that process, but also even more impactful for things like fat burning, your metabolism, appetite control is the secretion of some of the digestive hormones. So things that you don't hear as much about. And when I talk about hormones in my recent book, I'm talking more so about hormones like leptin, adiponectin, ghrelin, and these impact, our satiety level, whether we feel like full after a meal. It helps regulate our appetite, but it also influences how our cells like switch to fat burning or fat storage mode.
Yes, that's a huge topic. That could be a whole episode just on its own, I'm sure. But let's go back to the digestion a little bit, just because of, my history with thyroid cancer and a lot of people that I work with. I see digestive issues all the time. And so when you talk about low stomach acid, I feel like that is very, very common with people with a thyroid condition to have low stomach acid. Therefore, it's hard to break down the proteins and other things too. But how do the bitters correlate to someone with thyroid issues or having some kind of condition? Is there a connection between the two?
Yeah, well, so we always think about like many different, especially endocrine disorders and the thyroid in that category of looking at gut health, because in the gut, we're going to see, a lot of the immune system activity stemming from what's happening in the gut. So making sure if you're maldigesting food and having problems with malabsorption, you're going to have inflammation in the gut. You're going to have sort of, these different cascade reactions throughout the body. You could be malabsorbing, as I mentioned, so you might not be getting all the nutrition out of your food. So you're not breaking it down fully. It's not getting absorbed properly. So now you don't have, or you have less level of bioavailability of various compounds that we know are really important for health and for, turning off some of these like tumor genes, right? So we know things like compounds in green tea and compounds in turmeric are really important for some of the genes that regulate the cells in the body that patrol for cancer.
Okay. Yeah. So you have 2 books. The newest one is The Bitter Prescription, and we'll talk about that more. And you also have one, Unzip Your Genes. And I know that you're, have an interest in the nutrigenomics, and I'm wondering how, you're talking about turning on genes, turning off genes. Can you describe that a little bit for people too, so they can understand what that means and how it relates to their nutrient uptake and bioavailability, and just go from there a little bit?
Yeah. So we all have that set of genes that we're born with that we can't really, do anything about. I mean, we can't change the actual genetic code, but what can change based on your lifestyle, different things that happen during the course of your life, is the expression of the genes. And so we can have a more favorable expression profile. So say we have genes that predispose us to things like diabetes or high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, even Alzheimer's. We know that those genes may not get expressed, or there could be like suppression type genes that get turned on. So then even though we're at a higher risk of developing something like Alzheimer's, we actually can turn off some of those genes through dietary influence. Stress is another big thing. I know we're talking a lot about diet today, but stress is probably, I would probably rate it even higher than diet. And you've probably just seen this with people you've worked with as well.
For sure.
And so that really, that concept of expression of your genetic code is influenced by your lifestyle. So now some of the things in terms of dietary components I mentioned, like green tea extract and turmeric, those specific compounds will go in and they'll influence, many of those need to be absorbed. Some actually do have activity in the gut, but then again, we're working with, the immune system, the microbiome there as well. Bitters impact the microbiome in a
Mm-hmm.
positive way. But all of those things kind of impact how we're going to express our genes and how healthy we're going to be long term. If we're not absorbing our food properly. So, other things like vitamins and minerals are really important. These phytochemicals or bioactive bitter compounds in food are really important for us to be able to have like a good pattern of genetic expression. And ultimately, that's kind of, what we're seeing there. Those foods also act as really good, really effective antioxidants, and they can even upregulate our own antioxidant system in our body, so that we can do DNA repair also, which we know is really important when it comes to cancer.
So another, we all know this. We don't need to hire people like you and I to tell them to eat whole foods as much as they possibly can.
Yeah.
So there's just no getting around that good baseline nutrition is going to go such a long way for our overall health. And with the gene perspective, I remember, and maybe it was just me, maybe I was too literal, too black and white, but the thought when I was in genetics in college or whatever courses I took that had to do with genetics, it seemed like if you have this gene, this will be your destiny. If you have, and that's, I don't know if that's how it was taught or if highlighting other aspects of it, but there was never any discussion about if you live a certain lifestyle or if you optimize your lifestyle, that can greatly impact your outcome or the how your genes actually look.
Yeah.
That was never discussion. And like I said, maybe I missed that day in class or I don't know what, but
No,
it was
you didn't, because you
okay.
did, and that's how genetics was taught for many years, just
Yeah.
because no one knew that you could actually influence the expression of those genes. It's really in the last 20 years that field of epigenetics, which means above the genome. So we can't change those like bases, those like when
Yep.
people think about if you remember your classes, and there's like GC and AT, all these little base pairs that make up the DNA code. You can't really change those out. There are new technologies as well, like CRISPR, where you actually can splice pieces of DNA. That has been done in animals, and they're looking at trials to do that in humans. So I can't say you can't, but naturally that doesn't happen.
Right.
But there's emerging technology around that, but you can change that expression. So this is when a gene gets turned on or turned off, that whole concept. And that's where lifestyle comes into play, and even exercise, mindset, sleep, diet, all impact that expression of our DNA code.
Yeah, and all that goes into our outcome and just our ability to lose weight, but then to sustain weight. And I know you talk about that in the book. So the book, The Bitter Prescription, we'll talk about how you can access that later. But I loved what you wrote in the beginning of your book about how you've seen so many people come into your office, and the thought is when you turn a certain age, you're going to feel achy, or you're going to gain weight, or you're just kind of falling apart, and people sort of accept it. Maybe you can articulate that better, but it's stuff it's things I talk about with people I work with as well, that there's just this expectation that when they turn a certain milestone, or they just assume, well, I'm getting older, so I'm supposed to feel like this. I guess it's just how it is. And that was sort of how this came about, or partly how this book came about for you. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, for years I had seen this in clinical practice, and I wanted to really dive deeper into trying to figure out how to help a lot of people. But they would just basically and core principles is basically what you go back to. But people would describe, ever since I turned 35, 40, 42, like the age range varies. That I have, it seems like everything's going wrong, or I haven't changed my diet or exercise and I'm gaining weight, and it seems like ever since I hit 40 that's happening. And they may have been to see like primary care, conventional providers through the course of this, have a lot of sometimes obscure symptoms and been told, well, you're just getting older. And that's true. We are getting older. But a lot of times people have kind of like lost hope. They talk to their friends, they're dealing with the same sort of stuff. And they're like, yep, welcome to your 40s.
Yeah.
There's this great meme out there where it's like, welcome to your 40s. A mysterious ailment will be just assigned you shortly. No one can figure out.
Right.
But yeah, so people kind of like would kind of get like lose hope about it, right? That they think, well, this is it for me now. There's nothing I can do about it. I've gained this 15 pounds. There's no way this is coming off. And then they would, they're looking for causes, and like maybe we could find something like dysregulated glucose or a thyroid problem. And, that can be, an element of it. But a lot of times it is the product of the aging process. And digestive health, I would say, very, very important here, because as we get older, and I always tell patients as we get older, because I'm aging too, and I'm always telling them, I'm not calling you old. I'm saying like we're
all doing it. Yep.
We're all doing it. But there are ways to slow that down. So we can't halt it completely yet that I'm aware of, but we can slow that down. And a lot of people, because of our lifestyle, we're prematurely aging. So that's even a bigger problem because of the quality of our food and because of the stressful lifestyles we lead. Anyone can have, a lot of people have probably seen those pictures of American presidents before and after they leave office.
Yes.
So in the course of 4 years, and they look at this picture and what they look like afterwards, and the changes that are associated with aging, just like skin, gray hair from like not having any gray hair, are the aging process being speeded up most likely from the stress of that job.
Yeah, so if that's not a neon sign for how stress impacts our health, just look at those initial, someone coming into the office and then 4 years later, how that looks. Yes. It's unbelievable.
It is. But the good news is that we can slow that down and we can undo some of the changes that have happened, especially when it comes to weight. I'm routinely working with women who have been plateaued and stuck, and they've tried every new diet out there, and they lose a couple of pounds and gain them back. But most of the time they're not working with just these core principles that impact digestive health, absorption, the microbiome, and then their digestive and hormone metabolism. All of that is so critical as we get older, because we kind of reach this turning point at around 35 or thereafter where things are like breaking down instead of building. So we get more into a catabolic state, but we can buffer that.
So with regard to, helping the process out so that you're, able to lose the weight. And I know this is what your book is about in the Bitter Prescription. So what are some just tips or like maybe a couple highlighted points you can bring out to people so that they can kind of get thinking that maybe you need to look at weight loss a little bit differently? For example, with my programs, I'm working with people who are feeling horrible. Most of them are trying to get over some kind of thyroid condition or to optimize how their thyroid is functioning. And the weight loss is always, it's like that's top of mind for people. They're so, bent on that. By the time they work with me, they're kind of on a different plane because they know they have to do something different. But, just instilling in them that you have to get healthy sort of in order for weight loss to happen. Is that sort of the route you take with working with people you help out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working at those core principles of supporting digestive health, because we know for any sort of condition, whether, someone comes to you with a diagnosed thyroid problem or you're able to, discover abnormalities with thyroid function, ultimately you're working on the foundational health, which will come to digestion and nutrition. Like those have to be in play. And I'm always telling people, in order for your body to heal itself, because we have this amazing innate mechanism where we supply the right fuel and the right compounds and the right mindset, and things come together. Like that chemistry is happening just from your own innate body mechanisms. And what, this is where we get into the whole concept of making sure you're digesting food completely, looking at motility issues. Because some people are, when you ask, do you have any digestive problems? Most people are like, nope, I'm good. And so you start digging further, how often are you having a bowel movement? What does it look like? This is what I talk about all the time. My kids make fun of me because they're like, Mom's always talking about poop to people, especially now, like we're doing virtual visits and
Sure.
They can hear me talking about poop all the time.
It's important.
It is important. We need to know, like, what's happening there. But even things like, common complaints that, again, people will say since they got older, they might not necessarily say they have a digestive problem. They might be saying things like, I'm bloated, like, some foods, like I can't eat what I used to eat. It just like sits heavy in my stomach. Those are kind of telltale signs that things are off with the digestive tract, and that will typically mean that you're not digesting completely, and you can be having problems with malabsorption, which are big issues for malnutrition, because then you can't achieve that cellular health that you need in order to heal like endocrine metabolic conditions.
Right. So it kind of runs the gamut. It's whether you're one extreme to the next with the digestive health, whether you have chronic diarrhea or chronic constipation. And what I have found too, it's become so normal to people. They don't even know, like you said, they're like, no, I'm fine, I think. And you dig deeper and you're like, oh no, this is not fine. This might be normal for you, but it's not normal or healthy. So unless you get that core issue worked out, it's hard to release the weight. So when you work with people, and everyone's different, everybody starts at a different place, and everybody wants to know, well, how fast can I lose the weight? What do you say to people who are just in that mindset of, I want it gone? And, they're impatient.
It's actually an really important element. And so when we think about like fat loss, a lot of people are thinking like, I want to lose this weight. I want to look better in my clothes. I want to feel better about myself. But that belly fat, that visceral adipose tissue is a problem. So like, even when people are not interested in losing weight, they're like, no, I'm happy as I am, which is fantastic. Like, that's great that your mindset is there. We will still, like, I'll still want them to like understand why we need to get rid of some belly fat, because it acts as an organ of inflammation.
Right.
So in order to get healthy and to be able to heal any sort of like conditions in other systems, we need to lower the level of belly fat instead of just like throwing anti-inflammatories, right? Like so many people think their answers are like inflammation. And a lot of times that inflammation can come from like retained fat stores, right? So you're always, it's an uphill battle. So to lose that fat as we get older, here's the other issue that I bring up in my book as part of the bitter prescription, is that we do have to eat less. So when we're the people will say, I'm exercising the same, I'm eating the same as I always did. Like, why am I gaining weight now? And, maybe there is a metabolic problem. Maybe there is a thyroid issue. We definitely want to make sure, that we're assessing for that. But as we get older, our bodies don't need as many calories. Now, calories in, calories out. I know for some people that's controversial. If you eat 1,300 calories of like junk processed food, that's not the same as like a healthy, phytonutrient rich meal. But a lot of times what I have people do is do some calorie tracking for a couple of days before we even start to get into like an actual really solid plan, just to see what we're dealing with. So a lot of times when we do that, people are blown away at how many calories they're actually eating, and they can be eating healthy, but I'll get women and men. I actually had a male patient last week, and he did this. And he was with his breakfast having 3 tablespoons of honey, 56 grams of sugar. He had it was like clocking everything he had. He was on average eating like 2,800 calories a day. He's over 50. He has some fat mass to lose, and that was one of his concerns. But he also had some slightly elevated glucose levels, cholesterol. He wanted to get into a healthier place. And just that
Mm-hmm.
whole process of doing the calorie tracking and looking at like where your nutrients are coming from is mind opening for many people.
Yeah, like knowing the quality of those calories, like really looking at them.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of what you're talking about. It, a lot of I've heard people who've come in and worked with me, and they've said that their provider has said to them, it doesn't matter if you eat 100 calories of broccoli or 100 calories of Doritos or whatever, it's the same. The calories, a calorie is a calorie, and it, just biochemically, that just can't be. But like you said, as we age, things change. You probably need to eat less calories, but knowing where those calories come from. And I think I read something, there's some study that shows that most people underestimate their calorie intake by about 600 calories a day.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
Big time. Like it's a bit, and so that's the bitter prescription, is that part of it, that you have to eat less as you get older. Nobody wants to hear that.
Right. Nobody wants to hear that.
We don't want to hear that. But if you could, so it's not that you necessarily have to eat less quantity of food. It's like if you use the calories as a judge of how much food you're getting, you can eat like a lot of plants. Most plants don't have a lot of calories.
Right.
And sometimes it's adjusting things like oils. Like people are like, well, I only eat olive oil, but you start looking at how many calories are coming from olive oil, and they're, pouring olive oil on things. And those calories, I'm like, well, they're double plus the calories you would find in protein and carbohydrate. So when you start doing that math, it's easier to like scale back a little bit on the olive oil, that you just don't need that much fuel. Because as I said, once we're over 35 or so, we're starting to get into more catabolism. So we don't have as much anabolic demand. But the point that you bring up about 100 calories of broccoli versus 100 calories of like processed food, when we start to compare the two, okay, those are their like energy output. But what does the broccoli have? The broccoli has phytonutrients that influence our metabolism. So we actually could improve our metabolism by eating broccoli over like a food that's just devoid of anything that could bind the bitter receptors and impact our metabolism and digestive health.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing where people, again, get pretty black and white. And a lot of people are really tied to those foods that they love that are not necessarily good for them. And that's just kind of runs across the board. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. I feel like people have their thing. And that's where mindset becomes something that needs to be really focused on. And I know you put that into, helping your people go through their process and to help release the weight. And I think we underestimate the value of mindset and shifting that in order for our overall health. It's not just about losing X many pounds or dealing with one component of our health. It's a whole process. Is what I'm seeing the results with my patients.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. And that, there's no doubt. We know that mind body medicine is a field because it has so much established support in the literature and clinically that, our mind and body are not separate things. They influence each other. So like the healthy nutrition that's coming in will influence our emotional health, these feelings. So in the book, I do talk about bitter feelings. And you can basically tell if you're having them, are those feelings good or are they bad? If they're bad, they're bitter feelings and they're doing, wreaking havoc on your body inside. So just little things that you can do to help yourself shift into a more positive mindset. I'm sure everyone understands that concept of gratitude. It's just a simple starting place, but the more you can shift into an attitude that lasts throughout the day of like just appreciation for your surroundings, being more connected to nature, feeling more connected socially, emotionally with relationships. That whole social disconnection is an actual risk factor for disease. It's actually just as bad as smoking or being obese or being an alcoholic if we are not have meaningful relationships.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty powerful, especially in the light of everything going on right now, to really be mindful of keeping connection. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So where can we get this book? And I'm excited. I haven't been able to read the whole thing, and I'm excited for what I have read already. So I encourage everybody to go check it out. But where can we find this book?
It's sold anywhere you can find books sold online. in stores, so available on Barnes and Noble, Amazon. It is available on audio, Kindle. So any format that you're, used to reading, it's available there.
Awesome. And then where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my website is Dr. Stagg with 2 G's, drstagg.com. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. We post regularly on there, recipe ideas. Even when it comes to bitters, I did mention alcohol. We do some, I formulate cocktails that have bitter compounds in there. So I just posted a grapefruit, fresh grapefruit Paloma. So it's like tequila and fresh grapefruit juice. It's like the perfect summer drink, and it's good for you.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
I discovered a Paloma when I was on vacation once, and I very much liked that. So a grapefruit one, that would be delicious. Okay, good to know. So is there anything else you'd like to touch on that we maybe haven't covered, or anything else we didn't get into that you'd like to talk about more?
Yeah, we talked a lot about digestive health. Those are really core principles. A little about the aging process. There's a lot of, new science emerging about aging, and we did touch on some of the things that could help with slowing down the aging process. But, reducing belly fat is really important for slowing down the aging process. Regular physical activity, sleep, we didn't talk about a lot. There's
that's a huge topic
in there on sleep.
Oh, good.
And so that is something that when patients are coming in and they are having, they maybe have diagnosed illness, or maybe their primary complaint is weight loss. If they're not sleeping, we are focusing really heavily at that to try to correct the sleep patterns, because we know that in fact directly impacts our metabolism. The other thing that it does is it impacts our appetite and our food consumption. So you mentioned about how people underestimate their calories by like a few hundred calories, 400 to 600 calories. The same thing has been shown for, or similar thing has been shown for poor sleep. We will tend to eat 300 to 400 calories more the next day after we have had poor sleep. So if you're just like a chronic poor sleeper, this is like a big thing that would be potentially affecting your appetite and cravings.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we really focus on, this is where we may be using nutritional supplements for sure. But first we think about things like sleep hygiene, right? Making sure you're going to bed at, a decent hour, that you're not staying up too, like when someone's tired, if they kind of push through that, they end up missing what we call the sleep train. And then they are missing probably hours of sleep because they can't get to bed. So you kind of have to be really in that mindset and place where you're listening to your body and listening to those cues and going to bed at an earlier hour to get the needed sleep that you that will help you with metabolism and slowing down the aging process.
Yeah, the thing with sleep, and I think it's part of our culture, is that we have this mentality that it's virtuous to not sleep very much. It's I work all the time, or I don't need much sleep. It's kind of
and people use it as a bragging point. Like I can sleep 4 hours a night, and
I can function just fine. It's and it's funny because I struggle with sleep so much going through the kind of the depths of the thyroid issues I was having with, and then also after the cancer stuff. And I sleep so much better now than I did then. So to me, it's like this huge improvement, which it was, but I was still curious. So I got myself a sleep tracker, and I thought, I'm doing pretty well. And I wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't doing that well.
The hours were better, but the quality of your sleep.
Yeah.
How you run those sleep cycles. Yeah.
Yeah. It was huge to learn that. And then to know that, and I've only had it since probably February of this year.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a few months, and I can see what affects my sleep, what doesn't. And then obviously you can make choices to make that better. But so I guess I'm trying to say, shout out to sleep. People think that they're sleeping well, and you might want to check into that a little
Yeah,
bit
no,
more.
that's a really good point about the sleep quality, because it
Mm-hmm.
is really important that, yes, just the hours of sleep you're getting, certainly we want to like make sure you're sleeping enough, like actually going to bed to get enough sleep.
Right.
But you do really have to look at the quality, because the deeper restorative sleep is where we, do a lot of repair and regeneration. That those time frames are extremely, extremely important, and we know it is influenced by nutrition for sure, but also, like what you're doing in terms of emotional health, mental health. But this is where we think full body, mind body
Mm-hmm.
medicine here as well.
Yeah, it just trickles into sort of every aspect of our health. I mean, it's crazy, and I didn't give it a lot of credence before I decided.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just decided I need to look into it, even though there had been vast improvement. It just still wasn't where it should be. So that's what I love about what I've read in your book so far, is that you just cover so many bases for people, all in. It's a one-stop shop for helping people improve their health. So
Yeah, I hope so. That was
yeah.
my intention, is to kind of give like a really good understanding of the foundations of everything that really needs to be in place for you to, feel healthier and slow down that inevitable aging process.
Well, and it's allows people to feel empowered, and so that they don't have to just be, you know, told by their, healthcare provider, whoever they're going to, or just people in their family or their friends, and say, well, you did turn 35, so it makes sense that you're tired, or that you ache, or that you're, whatever, and people just go, oh, okay, this is normal, and
Right.
I just have, this is my plate, and it doesn't have to be that way. So this book is going to be very empowering for people. So I encourage everybody to go and check it out. So,
Thanks.
all right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I loved our chat. I feel like there's other topics we could, touch on another time. So
Yeah,
anyway, I
absolutely.
really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.